We all want to feel valued and included just the way we are. The same is true of our students. And yet, it can be a challenge to create and sustain a supportive, inclusive, equitable environment, especially in diverse international school settings. Hi, and welcome to Educators Going Global, where we invite aspiring and veteran international educators to expand their knowledge of all things related to international education. My name is Audrey. My co host David and I bring almost 50 years of combined experience teaching overseas to the table. In this important conversation, we discussed what it really means to foster belonging, the practical realities and opportunities for inclusion in international schools, and the steps school communities can take to better understand, value, and support neurodiversity. Wherever you're coming from, you are welcome here. After all, aren't we all a little bit neurodiverse in our own way?
Hello, Maymouna. Welcome to Educators Going Global. We're so excited to have you here. We know recently you were in the thick of it in New York, but you're not there anymore. So where are you?
I am in sunny Dakar, Senegal. It's 90 degrees and hot right now.
Ooh, ooh.
My old school.
Yes. Hey, Audrey. So good to see you.
Hey, Maymouna. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Welcome back to your school there. And let's do a little connection here with your going global. You've been global for a while, but you're from New York, but you have connections there. Could you share a going global story with us?
Yeah, I have two, but I'll share one that I think speaks more to who I am and where I am in my journey. So, when I was growing up in New York City, my family is Senegalese American. I identify as Senegalese American. We had a hard rule in the house that we actually couldn't speak any English in the household because it was important for my mom, who's a single parent in the New York City. New York City, for those that don't know, is one of the, especially the Bronx, is one of the poorer communities in all of the United States, large West African population, Dominican, very much global pot. If you look at the entire United States and New York, I think Bronx is really, really that. But it was important for her that we really held on to our culture, which I was American. I was born and raised in America, grew up in New York. I'm a New York girl, the Bronx in particular. So I didn't understand this desire for us to continue to learn French and Wolof in the United States. And my entire childhood, we were not allowed to speak any other language except for those two languages. And I like resented my mom for that for a long time,
As kids do.
as kids do. Little did I know that I would end up living in Dakar, Senegal, years later, years later. I mean, I don't even think I dreamt it. And I would be in a comfortable place coming into the country because I spoke the language and because I could connect with the people that were here. So that's my going global story.
Oh my goodness. That gives me shivers. Like your mom was such a visionary in that way.
She was. She
Yeah.
was. Yeah, she was. And she also, I mean, because I wasn't a perfect, Wolof was my second, third language. And French, I acquired it as I went through school. But I would say those two languages, and particularly French, there's a connection there because one of my very first students, and I know we're going to talk about it later on, was Japanese who only went to the French system in his entire international career. And therefore, because my mom insisted that I learn Wolof and French, when he came into my classroom as a new international educator, I was able to connect with him because I spoke his language. Right.
That is
So,
amazing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
love it. I
yeah.
love it.
So I'm thankful for that.
So we can say nangadef.
Yes, magnifique. Well, that's Wolof, but yes, yes, we can say that.
And we can say bienvenue and comment ça va?
And
Excellent.
bonjour, oui, 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 ça va.
Yeah. All right. And people in Senegal, at least in Dakar, are like that. Like they always say hello. You're walking down the street, total random strangers, and they're like, bonjour, and it's funny because then I would always end up singing this song from Beauty and the Beast, if you know it. Bonjour,
I know the
good
song.
day.
I
How
know the
is your
song.
family? So like, anyway, just a thing to share. But I love it. I love, and maybe you may agree that Senegal is one of the most welcoming places. Like, talk about inclusion and embracing diversity. They love it, right? And the whole thing of, the whole Christian Muslim thing, I
Hmm.
think is amazing, where they all share meals. When it's your holiday, you share your special meal with your neighbors who are
Hmm.
of the other faith, etc. And there's openness, there's churches, there's mosques, and so on. And
Yeah.
it's a beautiful, beautiful place to be. I love
It's
it.
actually pretty incredible because I think 80% of the population is Muslim and 20 is Christian, but you can be within the same household actually, and you wouldn't necessarily know who's in what religion just because of the harmony that exists within the household. So I think, yeah, there's definitely a sense of inclusion and inclusive behaviors within reason, within the families and within the culture. I think, yeah, for sure. I would agree.
Yeah. It's a great place to go global to, or go home to, depending on your how you view it, your perspective. All right. So let's hop into our guiding question for the show, which is, how do international schools create and support a community where inclusion and neurodiversity are understood, valued, and supported for true equity? And just to get into a sub question so we can not chew that whole big pie all at once, the first sub question is, let's get into some definitions. So if you could start by sharing your definition of inclusion.
I mean, for me, inclusion is, it's cliche, I know, but it's the feeling that you belong, right? Like no matter where you come from, how you look, what your abilities or disabilities are, you have that feeling that you belong. And I've felt that way in many time periods in my life. I've also felt like that as well in some of my experiences. But at the heart of it for me is that feeling that there's spaces that are created or that exist where you feel like you really belong to show up as you are.
And it just so matters in a school, doesn't it?
It really does. It matters even more because international schools in general, the majority of them, there's some, that their mandate is to maybe be more nationalistic than international, but you have nationalities and cross sections from all over the world, and you want to be able to, as a student, as a child, as a faculty member who's working in those spaces, number one, the kid wants to have some sort of representation which helps them with belonging. The faculty member, you want to feel like the ideas and your perspective are valued, and therefore you're sort of influencing and modeling for the student so that they can also feel belong. I mean, representation is a huge part of, for me at least, inclusion and belonging. And I was having this conversation with someone not too long ago, and we were talking about career trajectory. And I remember telling them, for the first time, I feel like I can take on A, B, and C as a career because I saw other people who are now doing it that kind of look like me. And that wasn't my
Mm-hmm.
feeling before.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
No, absolutely. And also, just to take it a little deeper, maybe you're going to talk about this more in a bit, but we were just speaking with some lovely ladies who are connected with the SPAN group, the
Mm-hmm.
Safe
Mm-hmm.
Passage Across Networks, and they have developed
Mm-hmm.
Student Ambassador Program guide. And,
Mm-hmm.
they were
Mm-hmm.
talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if a kid doesn't feel like they belong, they can't learn,
No,
so it's basic
no.
to the whole process of education. All right. On to neurodiversity. How do you define that?
I think we're all a little bit neurodiverse. I think we all have aspects of us that makes us different in the way that we think, process, see the world. Some of us, the way that it presents itself might be on a different level. I don't want to say severe, but you can use that terminology if you want. But I think it just presents differently for some people, and in those differences, I think as educators, we need to be able to recognize how we can turn that key on so that that difference in how it presents itself can be also allowed to be nurtured within the classroom. And so for me, I think we all have a little bit of neurodiversity in us, all of us. I really do. And I just think it depends on how it shows up for you individually in the different settings. And some of it is, the spectrum is quite wide for some people. And we as educators, we need to understand our students by building those relationships, but then we need to, again, be able to unlock that key so that we can be able to access that difference that the individual is showing up as, to be able to really sort of get them to feel like they are included.
Right, back to the first part. And I really like your lens of the teachers thinking of themselves as neurodiverse as well, so that they can empathize a little bit more. So that's cool. All right. And then equity.
I think equity comes down to, we all need different things to be successful. And those different things that we need to be successful, we need to make room for those different things to be able to live. So, for example, I give you an example. I have a daughter, she's 7 years old. She's quite active, right? And so, as I recognize, she's also seven. Her attention span is like this big, as we know. 7 year olds. And so for her, equity might mean I need to give her like an extra 30 minutes. I can't be so strict with the rules with bedtime. I need to give her a little 30 minutes of downtime. And I might need a whole hour and a half because I'm also very active too, and I have a lot of things on my mind. And so I'm giving each of us, myself and my daughter, what we need to be able to be successful. And it looks different because it's unique to each of us and what we're presenting. And so for me, that's what equity comes down to. We know just by, I think we all know, if we're listening to this podcast and if we're aware of what's happening in the world, we know that inequities exist. We know that there are systematic things that have been placed so that equity is not always valued. But at the heart and the basis of it for me is just making sure that individuals receive what they need that are specific to them so that they can be successful.
Right. And when there's equity, the sense of bing, bing, belonging increases. So I love
Exactly.
that. How they all tie
Exactly.
in together. That's beautiful.
All right. Well, thank you for those insights. And is so much of what we learn in life is connectivity and how approaches and values and principles and beliefs are, in a way, supportive of each other, of each of these areas of how we experience life. So thank you for that. Now, let's take a closer look at the work that you do with international schools. And what I'm seeing is a three-pronged approach that you provide: consultancy, coaching, and collaboration. So let's unpack each of these and what they would look like when you go into a school to support them. So, how about we start with consultancy?
Yeah. So thank you. I have a consultancy that I run, Sakho Learning Consultancy. We could talk about it at the end. But yes, my idea was to be able to support schools in developing like their student support programs, provide audits for them, and through various conversations with administrators as well as schools, these were kind of the top three things I kept getting questions about. So it just made sense that these should be the things that I work on with schools. And so for me, the consultancy piece is, in my field of work, I consider myself an expert. I've been in student support, special education, student disabilities, whatever you want to call it. That's been my bread and butter since I began teaching 15 years ago. And so for me, being a consultant in that space is being able to provide expert advice to schools and leadership. It means that I am able to come in and like offer some solutions to some of the things that they're facing. It's more like a problem solving type scenario. It also means that I'm doing some analysis. For example, this past June, I just finished working with a school where I conducted an audit for them. And I pretty much went through their entire program. And it was almost, if you've been an evaluator for any of the accredited agencies, it's kind of similar to that, right? You triangulate, you look, and I've done that a couple of times. And then you provide them some recommendations as to, hey, you might want to do A, B, C, D, and Z if you want your programs or your services or your students, to be in a better position. So that's the consultancy aspect of it. The coaching is more like a joint effort, right? I'm trying to help you through your goals or your teamwork or your whatever it is that you feel within your role. Maybe it's in an admin or leadership role, maybe it's in a student support director kind of role, or maybe you're a teacher who's feeling like you need a little bit of extra support. But the idea is that I'm helping you develop. I'm helping you develop. I'm helping you with your personal growth, with your discovery. And it's all centered around how can we use that then? Because for me, inclusion is also a mindset, right? If you don't have the proper mindset, it's very difficult to believe in inclusion and then also believe that students who are neurodiverse, faculty who's neurodiverse, whatever, they also deserve that within their day to day. Because if you don't have the right mindset, I think it's very difficult for them to have buy-in to be implementing programs that offer that. And so that's what the coaching is meant to provide you with. Really just, guiding, asking questions, working on some things that develop you and grow you. The collaboration is a joint effort, right? And so we have a goal that we're sharing together and we're trying to make sure that we co-create it. It's two-way. So I'll give you an example of that. The same sort of audit thing that I did, I also did a workshop for them. And so for me, that was a collaborative workshop because the things that came out of the audit, in addition to the different conversations I've had with their leadership, we designed a workshop that was specific to some shared goals that I had that I wanted them to sort of think about, and also some goals that they wanted me to make sure that their staff and their leadership was also on board with. And I think sometimes it helps when you hear an outside person saying some things, right? So that would be an example of what we've done in terms of a collaborative approach. And so, yes, it's all three that I try to make sure that I can provide because I feel like I'm well positioned to be able to do that.
I really appreciate those definitions because they are words that are coming up when I'm online in Facebook groups or Reddit about international schools, and these terms are coming up. And I was listening to a podcast with Kim Cafino, a real leader in instructional coaching, and she
Mm-hmm.
gave pretty much the same definitions. And another trend we're dealing with, and it's wonderful, is that Senya is really expanding the understanding of neurodivergent learners. And we're hearing that more and more international schools are expanding their openness to letting students come in who they might not have let in before.
Right,
So that's been
right,
going
right.
on as well. And then with instructional coaching, that's really taken off in all the
Yes,
different disciplines and things like that. So again, thank you for sharing those definitions.
you're welcome.
Mhm. All right. So maybe you can take us on the road here and talk about some current opportunities that you see in international schools for them to expand their efforts of inclusion and support of neurodiversity, leading to increased equity.
I think I'll start where David left off. I think that it's true. I think that there is a desire. Let me take a step back. There's the political landscape, which we can't really ignore, right? So put that on the back burner for a little bit, right? Absent or present of that, I think that there's a genuine interest in making sure that students are valued, seen, heard, full stop, right? So I think that the first thing that I see in terms of opportunities is exactly where David left off, is that I think more schools are willing and more open because they're bored. I, honestly, it comes down to like a board decision sometimes to be able to say, we want to be able to be more inclusive. How can we do that? Right. And so I think more boards are on board to be able to allow students of varying backgrounds to come into their school because they recognize that it will bring a rich experience for everybody involved and it will lead to greater equity. So I think there is an opportunity there. I think that in order to do that well, though, and shout out to Lauren Jones, who just did a presentation not too long ago with Andrew Hoover at the Senia Institute, there are conversations around the funding aspect of that. How can we do that in a way where we're accurately and appropriately funding programs? Because for me, I really believe, Audrey and David, if you're going to commit to something, you got to do it well, right? No haphazard business here. If you're going to say we want to develop a a program that accepts students that are severe disabilities, that need, physical, whatever it is, make sure that you are backing that up with the money that it needs to be able to fully have that be successful. Because I think if you don't do that, you're wasting space. Like, you're not really doing it justice. It's really not fair to the students that you're bringing in. So I think that's the first thing. There's an opportunity there. I think there's also opportunities because, again, Senia, as you mentioned, there's also NFI, there's also IFIB, there's organizations out here, there's individual consultants like myself that have been working in these spaces for a long time. And I think we were all frustrated, at least I'm going to speak for me, that things seem to be moving quite slow. And maybe it was because the mindset needed to shift. Maybe it was because families, international families in particular, are a little bit afraid or unsure as to where to take their kids. Where can they really be safe at? Where can they get the resources that they need? What about within the community? If something comes up, you have the barrier of language. How can they really be able to access things if they actually needed additional services? So I think there's an opportunity there because more people are now, I think, trying to support international schools like me and other people who are out there and organizations to be able to really make sure that families who come into international settings feel like even if the resources are lacking, that there's a collaboration or a community that they can count on to be able to support them and their family, right? So I think there's an opportunity there. I also think that there's a greater willingness in general from teachers. I think a lot of schools are modeling their student support or special education program from what they saw in the United States. Because I think a lot of times, especially if you get funding from departments of the United States, a lot of times the programs that you institute are coming from the IDEA Act, the Disabilities Act, all those things, right? And that was what, 70s, 1970s, 1960s. We're now in 2025, right? And so if you're still having a resource room in 2025, there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity because there's much more research, there's more information, there's more access. There really isn't a reason, in my opinion, that there's still practices from a long time ago when we first sort of the science behind, making sure that we support students with disabilities. I think the last opportunity that I might want to highlight is the need for data. There is so much information out there that supports that this is a good thing, right? And so when you look at the data in terms of how well adjusted the kids are who are exposed to students who are different when they go off in life, how much better they are because of the relationships and the connections that they make, at the end of the day, it's just something good to do. Right. And so I'm happy that there's more data out there now that supports that inclusion and neurodiversity and making sure students of varying backgrounds are considered. I'm happy that there's more research now because sometimes you can use that research again to back up your cause and to lobby for the programs and the services that you might want to institute in your school.
Boy, howdy, you just nailed about 7 huge topics when it comes to student services and student support. As a counselor and a member of student support teams, I would say to folks listening to this, if your school is not doing all the things that you were just talking about, let's bring some people in like you to do an appraisal, to do an audit, to gather information, and then, like you were saying, through your different roles, whether it's you or someone else, to help them move forward. Because you hit on exactly what I was going to interject. I wasn't going to say it as eloquently as you. No haphazard business here. I think
Right.
that is massive because we also have people coming on talking about schools that are less oriented towards education, more oriented towards finances. And they can clearly open their doors to a lot of students with different needs and say, yay, we're going to have you come in, and then not support those students. And that's
Right.
the last thing in the world we want. And what makes me a bit curious is I wonder if the accreditation agencies are really picking up on this shift, that schools are opening to more neurodivergent students, and then they're coming in and holding people accountable, not just the student services, but administrators. But also, as you're pointing out, classroom teachers, because if we're going to differentiate and individualize to support all learners, it really needs to be happening in the classes. And you were referring to that, just having a resource, the old style. Well, let's send Johnny to the resource class instead of supporting Johnny and Susie in the regular mainstream classes. And the last thing I want to share with our listeners who might not have much experience overseas and they're thinking about going. So one of the things that schools rely on are community services, not often public, but private providers, counselors, therapists, learning support providers. So that is part of the greater community, how schools can support learners. So I just wanted to say thank you again for just nailing that topic.
Oh, you're welcome. Which I think the passion that I have for this is definitely you hear. I think you hear it in my responses, and I have a story about that later on. But I think you mentioned a little bit about the accreditation agencies. I mean, I was a part of the anti-discrimination task force that convened in Geneva in 2022, and I feel like it was really good actually to have the accreditation agencies there because this can be considered part of discriminatory practices, right? Because you're deciding that you don't want to, and I guess you have that right as an international school, but I mean, at the basis of it, in the heart of it, you're saying, I don't want you because you have a disability or you learn differently. And so I'm curious to see in the future, but I do think that the accreditation agencies, at least from my interaction with them when I went to Geneva, and I know that that task force has continued since then with the different subgroups, I do think that they're battling and thinking about how they can sort of address this. I do. So I'd be curious in the future to see what comes out of those bodies.
Yeah, so I'm kind of curious where this leaves us in terms of hiring practices for neurodiverse teachers. That's something that just popped into my mind.
I would completely agree. And the thing about it is, Audrey and David, which you know because you've been international educators for a long time, relationships are very important as a faculty
Yeah.
member, and sometimes people who are neurodivergent, that is a challenge for them. Let's just be upfront. And I
hmm
think if you understand that about someone who's neurodivergent, then it's not easy at all, but maybe it's a little bit easier to help them to be able to navigate. And I think sometimes we chalk it up to the person's being difficult or the person's A, B, C, D, and the third. That might be true, but maybe it is because of these other things that you haven't considered.
And it just so matters in a school, doesn't it?
Yes.
So let's move into the reality. Again, I'm talking about trends. People are sharing with us that schools are more open, more inclusive, and at least putting efforts forth. But what are some of the barriers in international schools to expand their efforts for inclusion and to support neurodiversity that would lead to more equity in their schools?
I think one of the biggest barriers that I've seen, David, is buy-in. I think buy-in is one of the biggest problems that I've seen. Getting the parents, the faculty, sometimes even the administration on board with what seems like it makes sense and it should be happening. And I think sometimes what happens is, honestly, I think that the vision and the mission for where the school should be sometimes doesn't match the reality of where they are at. And I think when you have a misalignment between the vision and mission and the strategic planning or, the realities of the ground, it's going to be a huge barrier to actually bringing in those kind of programs and those services for the population of students that you might be able to serve. I think another one that I've also seen in terms of barriers, and I think I said it as well as an opportunity, is students who often, generally, I'm going to stereotype a little bit, but students who often need extra services, sometimes those extra services are just not readily available. Right. And so perhaps you're able to differentiate for a student in the classroom in some capacity, right? You've trained your teachers, you've gotten the PD that
hmm
they need, whatever it is. But maybe the capacity of your school or the size of your school means that you don't have a counselor readily available. Or maybe there's not a physical therapist or there's not an occupational therapy person, whatever it is. And those are other things that are really needed for the success of that student within the school system, right? And so I think that's also a barrier because, again, you're going to other parts of the world where you probably only hear English sometimes within the classroom setting, or French or whatever it is your main language. But then you have all these other services that you might need, but you don't have access to because it's not available in the language that you would understand. But that's also an opportunity too, because I've also seen a lot of online things. I think, for example, Linden Group does a great job at that. So that can also be an opportunity. But if you're thinking young age, like early intervention, that has to be face to face, right? Those services cannot be in a virtual setting. It's not going to be as effective as it needs to be. I think the other thing too is like there are some families that honestly they're still thinking in the olden ways, and that academics, 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 right? And my kid has to have a 44 in the IB exam, or they have to have all A's, or whatever the case may be. And I need a school that's going to value that, and that's most important. And if you're a student or a family whose kid has needs, you're going to bring down those values. Let's be real, like the academics is not going to look like that, because it's going to be more representative of the reality of what a school should be. The kids that are on top, some of the kids who are struggling, and those who are average. And I think sometimes those parents are very vocal, and they have a lot of power and they have a lot of money, and they're the ones, sometimes lobbying for certain changes or initiatives. And sometimes, you all know this, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And so that's the major barrier that I've also seen. I think lastly, what I've also seen is that I think sometimes it's well meaning, but I don't think it's effective, is this idea that we should charge extra services for kids who are neurodiverse. I've also seen it on the ELL side too. I've also seen in some schools where if you do not speak English as a main language, if you're participating in an ELL program, you get charged extra services. And when you present it like that, it looks like a deficit. There's something wrong with me that I have to be charged $10,000 extra, or my family has to pay these extra fees because I learn differently or I see the world differently. It doesn't really create, again, that belonging or the inclusion that the school is saying that it wants to do. Ultimately, it should be the same cost as everybody else. And then the resources, again, should match. It should not be haphazard, as I said. And so for me, those are some of the barriers that I've seen, honestly, in terms of being able to fully do this well.
I want to speak a little bit to your sharing about, you didn't use these words, but how a school can get stuck in the way they approach student support. There's been the model, the resource classroom, and all that for a long time. And this brings back memories. Back in the early 2000s, I worked as an instructional coach for technology at an international school. And we designed a new curriculum review system where I was there, the gifted ed teacher was there, the librarian was there, and I tried to get the learning resource teachers to come for a couple of reasons. One, because to me, in my experience, they have such a wealth of instructional strategies, more than your average teacher, that not only help certain students, but they can help all students. So I really tried to push them to come to these meetings, that we would design the curriculum already differentiated and in some cases individualized for some specific kids. And that was a big barrier. And then going forward, my last school, I offered the same approach, and the learning resource teachers were up for it. But then we got into just kind of the twatty. This is the way we've always done it. If my kids are in my classroom struggling, I'm sending them to Tom and Betty, instead of Tom and Betty coming into our planning meetings and saying, here's how you can support their learning needs as visual learners for. And then we know what would happen. The light bulbs would go off and teachers go, oh, that's going to help Ahmed. That's going to help Lynn. And you get all that collaboration. So I'm just wondering, with your working with schools, are you breaking through some of those barriers and folks being open to that different dynamic in supporting these learning support teachers, seeing them as coaches?
I think it depends on who's setting the tone, honestly, in terms of the leadership. I've seen both. And let me add to that, David. I think that both of what you said can exist. I think that you can have a kid that maybe needs to come out of the classroom, and also you have some kids that maybe need to stay in the classroom. they're not exclusive in my observation. But I think it really depends on the leadership and how they set the tone. And where I've seen that you have buy-in, exactly what you're saying, from the resource teachers who are equally willing to collaborate with the homeroom teachers or the subject teachers, is because that collaboration time is actually built into the schedule. It's like a forced marriage almost, I like to say,
Nice.
because you're making the time to really take ownership of this student, and everyone is on board in terms of, okay, I'm going to take on the planning and I'm going to share everything related to the planning for these kids. Or maybe you're doing it across the group of classes for that grade, whatever it is. So I've seen it where that's been really good, because I think the leader has said, or the manager, however you want to call them, I'm building this into the schedule. This is what it has to look like. This is what I'm expecting. And they're actually coming in and checking, right? Like, they're not leaving people to their own devices as well. I've also seen where that all has been in place, but for some reason it's not working. It's not working. It could be, again, back to the relationship aspect, because at the end of the day, even me, who's an outsider, I'm still coming. Teaching is very territorial.
Oh, yeah.
People don't like people coming into their space and telling them what to do and how to do it. So it's easier if you're an outsider to do something like that. I come in, I say what I have to say, I give my opinion, and then I leave, and then, you don't have to ever see me again. But it's quite difficult if you have a colleague that their role is, that might not be who they are, but their title and their role calls for them to come in and give you some guidance. And there often is, who do they think who they are? I've been here for so long, I know what I'm doing. So teachers
Yeah.
in general, I admit it, we're very territorial. So there are many reasons why, even with all the right elements, the planning block, the timing, the resources, the expertise, it still doesn't work well. And I think what I was confronted with, that helping and supporting a school, I brought it back to the mission and the vision. And I was like, okay, but you're saying that this is your mission and this is your vision, and there's a clear misalignment with some of the individuals that are working here with this mission or vision. So what are we going to do about that? And I just, you just pose it, and you
Sing.
and you leave it. You just pose it and you leave it, because sometimes that's what you have to do.
And you can leave.
And you can leave.
The beauty of the
Yeah.
consultant role. Yeah. Well, I appreciate all that you're describing, and sounds like you really are able to go in and help a school take a hard look at what they're doing, and, as you say, work on aligning it better with their mission. So that's awesome work you're doing. We're going to take a little sidestep here for a moment, because you also, woman of many hats, have been working with supporting and mentoring aspiring leaders through
Yes.
ALOC and other places. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Huge shout out to Kevin Simpson of ALOC and everybody else that I've met through ALOC. We had a little meetup in DC, and it was so affirming
Oh,
this past
nice.
June. It was really beautiful. Sorry you weren't there, Margaret Park. I thought you were in DC. Sorry. I was first introduced to ALOC, I think, in 2020, with everything that was going on in the world. And I think I was like, well, how can I help? How can I be involved? And actually, through conversations with someone, because again, relationships, and I'm a very relational person, they put me in contact with Kevin, and they were telling me, oh, if you talk to Kevin, there's this other person who's like an incredible, passionate individual who is really like you in terms of how they see inclusion and what they want to do with that. And they linked me with Marianne DeRosa, Dr. Marianne DeRosa, shout out to her as well. And through working with her, we actually created a learning support affinity group under the ALOC umbrella. And so the purpose of that group is exactly that: to coach, mentor, be a space for other teachers, administrators, anyone that's affiliated in some capacity with learning support within their school. And that's sort of how my involvement with ALOC kind of happened. And then through working with them and just Kevin's confidence in me, I was able to really take on I'm really proud of this actually, a role as a mentor for the Aspiring Leaders of Color program. So ALOC has a number of programs, but one of the ones that really touched me was the Aspiring Leaders of Color program, because I just remember when I was trying to break it into leadership and how being a Black woman, Senegalese American, however, all the different identity markers that I carry, I think it was always important for me, A, to have somebody who can coach me, because maybe there's some blind spots that I couldn't see. B, to have a sponsor who's going to say my name in spaces and places that I might not be.
Mm-hmm.
And then C, someone who's a mentor who's going to ask those hard, reflective questions that's going to make me, grow. And I feel like as time went on, I found those three individuals. And it always made me wonder, especially young women, do they understand the value in that, regardless of the background you come from? They understand the value in that? And how can I be that for someone else, sort of paying it forward? And so that's really why I got involved with the Aspiring Leaders of Color program. And one of the people I mentored is now in a leadership position at an international school on the continent. And
Woohoo!
she's absolutely thriving and doing really well. And so I'm really happy for her. And it was just really a full year journey, from August until June. And they do a capstone project of something that they're passionate about within their school system and within international education. There's been many days where we would speak on the phone and problem solve, and because sometimes you have to talk to your kitchen table before you go and, decide how you're going to strategically
Mm-hmm.
move around and say things and sort of respond, not react. I've learned that as well, to situations. And so, yeah, it's been a great opportunity. And I really, truly, fully believe in empowering women. We have enough male leaders in the world. They've been running things for a long time. We need a shot at women leading. And yeah, so that's sort of what it's been about for me.
Awesome. You go, girl, as they say.
Thank you.
And if I understand correctly from Kevin, whom we also interviewed at one stage, ALOC is all volunteer, right?
All volunteer. All
Good
volunteer.
for you.
They
That's amazing.
they've been around for
Hmm.
9 years now. All volunteer, and so that says something.
Yeah. Well, and also to you for volunteering to be a mentor. And, the payback, I'm guessing, is what you said, where one of your former mentees is now a leader and really thriving. So awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, I really feel like, Audrey, all of us really, but me personally, I think if I could leave this earth better than when I came in, then it's a good thing, And so I hope that my impact is to be able to again help more women, just because I just remember all the barriers and all the things that I endured. And I'm not saying that everybody has to have those experiences, but when you carry certain identity markers, it's more likely that the experiences are going to be the same, or if not very
Mhm.
similar.
Mhm.
And so if we can
Mhm.
not gatekeep, if we can open the door a little bit more, if we can, support, I'm all for that. And so I want to be able to do that, and I want that to be part of my legacy.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I think the ALOC model could be a model for many other groups in education in general, but in international teaching. Like we've had a leader in coaching, like athletic coaching, after school programming, and you think of instructional coaches like Kim, who offers so many strategies. But I love this mentoring approach. I just think that's so valuable. And like you were just saying, you can feel isolated in trying to move forward. International
Yeah.
schools are super competitive places. And as much as we talk glowingly of it, I do go on Reddit a lot and see a lot of tough stories of
Yeah.
people struggling in different international schools. And so the more that you can have someone to connect with, that's a really valuable idea.
Yeah.
All right. We're just covering so many great topics, and I'm putting my hat back on of being a student services person. And like I said, I've really appreciated what you've shared. So, as we wrap up, is there anything else you would like to share with the audience?
I think most of your audience are international educators. I think that if nothing else, we all remember one teacher who made an impact in our life, right? Like one person, like mine was Miss Anderson. And I actually had a Miss Anderson story when I went to CISA as a keynote. Shout out to CISA this past March. And if it wasn't for her, I don't know that I would necessarily have thought to come into the teaching profession. And so if you think about the experience that you had with that teacher that made this impact and made you feel included, valued, belonged, whatever the words you want to use, I think commit yourself to being that person for someone else. In particular, students who are neurodiverse. Because sometimes students who are neurodiverse, some of them are struggling academically for sure, but they're also struggling behaviorally. And often what happens is they're pegged as the kid who, is bad or misbehaves or whatever the different things that we call them. When actually there's all these other things that are going on, and people are not really taking the time to build that relationship so that it can have a positive impact on them and really kind of get to know that kid. So I think I'm going to share and I'm going to request and I'm going to ask you to commit to being that for someone. I mean, those are the stories that when the kid is, I have one from ISD, for example, and they just graduated.
Yay.
And I remember my first grade student that I hope that I was that for them too, because I saw them years later after I left internationally and I had a random moment and met them on the street and they were thriving, and it really made me happy. And so I hope that we as educators, sometimes we get bogged down with the politics and the bureaucracy and all these other things that we can't really do much about as part of the job. But I think the bigger part of the job is the reason why you became an educator, yes. And also, like, make sure that you're committing to that every day to be that for someone else. Like be that little bit of light for that person, especially those that are neurodiverse. They may not seek you, they probably are already pegged and labeled, so it's difficult for them. And so make the road a little bit easier for those students in any way that you can.
Be a Mrs. Anderson.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, I am sure that some of our listeners would like to follow your work and see more about what you're doing. Can you share one or two ways they can follow you?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm taking a little break for the summer, enjoying life, but you can definitely find me on LinkedIn. Maymouna Sakho is my name on there. Through there, you can find all my pages. So I think we talked a little bit about it, Audrey. I have my Sakho Learning Consultancy pages on there. I also created a blog and a podcast that talks about moving back to Africa because I was just getting so many questions from people abroad like, why did you move back? Are you crazy? That's exactly how they said it. But I think it was good to share stories about myself and other people who had the audacity to move back and like make a way for themselves. So that's on there too. So definitely, I think LinkedIn would probably be your best bet. And if you want to learn more about the services and the products that I offer and how we can collaborate, I'm always open to collaboration and just supporting individuals. I have my website, sakoconsultancy.com. You can find me on there as well. Don't just stalk the page, reach out, let me know that you're there. Let's find a way. Because I've been getting a lot of that, so reach out so that we can be able to collaborate. I'm very happy and open to help.
This has been wonderful as I've been sharing and enjoying so much that you are presenting to our audience about the big picture and then down into the classroom of how to support all of our students. And I have to smile. I'm in the U.S. right now. I return to Southeast Asia in a few days. And as we know, the political climate here, there's a lot of struggle and such
Mm-hmm.
going on. And the theme of this show has been belonging. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see someone argue against that. I
Right.
I just don't get it. So
Right?
what we're trying to do in our schools is find ways to help students feel that they belong emotionally, socially, academically, and to schools out there that are being more inclusive. I'm going to mention my son, Sam. I always mention Max. Sam works for a big consultancy company. And they bring in people from his company to help Fortune 500 companies move forward, do what they want to do, and do it better. I really get the feeling now as schools try to move forward in inclusivity they need to bring in expertise. There's, as you've talked about, alignment, connecting to the mission. There's so many things going on to do it well. So folks, hire this wonderful educator, bring her in, and make a difference, even more of a difference for all of your students. So Maymouna, thank you.
Well, thank you, David.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
It was so
Been
nice
great
to
to catch
connect
up.
with you, Audrey, our ISD days. So nice to see you.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today on Educators Going Global.
You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and all the other usual suspects.
Please subscribe, like us, and leave a review on Apple and Spotify, and let your teaching friends know about us so we can grow our community.
Please reach out at educatorsgoingglobal@gmail.com and join our Facebook group, Educators Going Global, if you have ideas, comments, or wish to share a Going Global story of your own.
You can also find us on Instagram at Educators Going Global.
Please visit our website as well, www.educatorsgoingglobal.com. All our podcast episodes are on there by topic, along with blog posts, Going Global stories, and our ever-growing resource library. For now, this is Audrey
And David.
inviting you to travel,
Teach.
and connect with us.